What's up, guys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. We're going to continue with the book club, Dreamland by Sam Quinones today. This is part 3 of the chapter A Parent's Soul Pain. We'll probably finish it up here today. Page 294, and this will conclude part 3 of the book, and then part 4 is really, really short. So we're almost done with the book. Page 294 at the top. Most of these parents were products, as am I, of the 1970s, when heroin was considered the most vile back-alley drug. How could they now tell their neighbors that the child to whom they had given everything was a prostitute who expired while shooting up in a car outside a Burger King? Shamed and horrified by the stigma, many could not and did not. Opiate use in medicine had been destigmatized by crusading doctors, but destigmatizing the new opiate addiction had no prestigious crusaders. That task fell to parents of dead kids and a few individuals with a flair for guerrilla political action, which is how I would describe Brad Belcher. I visited Belcher because one night he had kicked the shins of the status quo in his hometown of Marion, Ohio. Like Portsmouth, Marion once thrived. Power shovels built in Marion helped dig the Panama Canal. But those days and those jobs were gone. Inertia had replaced optimism. Decades into the decline, hundreds of Marion kids had grown addicted to pain pills and then switched to heroin. The Chamber of Commerce desperately devised slogans, quote, "Downtown Marion, watch us grow." A casual observer could sympathize with Marion's city fathers. Like so many Midwestern towns, Marion was afflicted by forces that were awesome and unseen. A prolonged recession, the steady drip of jobs disappearing, had beaten at Marion. A lot of people with aspirations left. So too, Belcher felt, did any impulse to look at new ways of attacking problems facing the city. If you counted all the thefts, the drug dealing, the court cases, the hospitalizations, the pawns, the prison, and the people in jail, the town seemed to Belcher to be running on heroin. Yet the cops never appeared to make heroin arrests. The newspaper never mentioned it. Belcher, 28, with cropped hair and a way of speaking, is a recovering drug addict. With 5 years sober, he had the kind of energy common to many in recovery and chafed at Marion's apathy. One night it occurred to him to go online and order 800 large black signs and white letters proclaiming the insurgent message, "Heroin is Marion's economy." They arrived a week later. Late one foggy night, Belcher stuck those signs all over Marion, in cornfields, near the prison, outside churches, by bus stops, schools, along streets, in the better neighborhoods. "I was generally hoping for some kind of awareness, to get people talking about some kind of solution," he said. "It's in everybody's household." He was just about to put them up downtown that night when a police officer, a deputy sheriff, and a highway patrolman pulled him over. They roused the city attorney. Marion city government mobilized that night to uproot Belcher's signs. Only 10 remained when Marion awoke. But then a drug dealer put snapshots of the signs on Facebook. That created the effect Brad Belcher had sought. The signs became the talk of Marion. Television reporters came. City officials held a town hall meeting. Cops began making heroin arrests, and the proper reported them. There was a march to City Hall. None of that solved the problem, of course, but it did get people talking, which Belcher took as a start. And you would be correct. That is the first step to all of this. The first step to revolution is just talk. Talk politics. Rule number 1 of Political Fight Club. Another person I saw cutting through the silence surrounding opiates was Wayne Campbell, a barrel-chested guy with the personality of a football coach as he was part-time. About a year after Joanna Crone in Portsmouth, Ohio, became likely the first parent in the country to raise her voice and organize in response to the opiate epidemic, Wayne Campbell followed suit in the Columbus suburb of Pickerington. Like Joanna's son, Wayne's oldest son, Tyler, had also played football. He was a safety for the Division I University of Akron Zips. In 2009, the school opened a 30,000-seat football stadium, a monument to corporate America in sports. The $61 million Infocesian Stadium, I don't know what that is. Have you heard of Infocesian? Apparently it's a company. Infocesian Stadium, named for a company that operates call centers, also has a field named for the Summa Health System, a nonprofit hospital, club seating named for First Merit Corporation, and a press box named for a local credit union. If ever the Division I school needed a good year from its team, 2009 was it. Instead, the team disintegrated under the pressure to win and the weight of pills. The Zips star quarterback that year, Chris Jacquemain, grew addicted to OxyContin after suffering a separated shoulder. He began stealing and was expelled from the team early in the season, then left school. Jacquemain's life spiraled down. He died of a heroin overdose 2 years later. Something like that happened to Wayne's son, Tyler. A walk-on and an eager and aggressive safety, Tyler Campbell was prescribed 60 Percocets after shoulder surgery following the '08 season. He was given no instructions about the drug or how to use it, nor was it clear that he needed that many pills to recover from the surgery. Doctors told Wayne it was the usual post-surgical prescription. It seemed to Wayne that doctors wanted to make sure patients didn't return quickly, so they prescribed a lot. That was part of the problem, he figured. Wayne spoke later with Jeremy Bruce, a wide receiver on the team, who provided a glimpse of the team unraveling that year. The coaches and trainers, Bruce said, felt pressure to field a winning team as the school opened its new stadium. After the games, some of the trainers pulled out a large jar and handed out oxycodone and hydrocodone pills, as many as a dozen to each player. Later in the week, a doctor would write the players' prescriptions for opiate painkillers and send student aides to the pharmacy to fill them. I was on pain pills that whole season, hydrocodone or oxycodone. I was given narcotics after every single game, and it wasn't recorded. It was like they were handing out candy, Bruce told me. One problem the team faced was a steep drop-off in talent from the first to the second string, Bruce said. As first stringers got hurt and second stringers couldn't fill in, he said, quote, "It's a snowball effect because of the pressure and the stress just to get those first stringers back on the field. I think that's where the narcotic came into play, and that's why it was handed out so easily, the stress and the pressure to win right now." J.D. Brookhart, the team's head coach that year, said that he knew nothing of the extent of the opiate dependence on the team that Bruce describes. "That wasn't the case that we know of," he said. "I don't think it was anything that anybody thought was anything rampant at all, not from the level I was at. It's not like trainers or coaches had any authorization to prescribe these pills. These pills were ordered by doctors." Injuries were the team's overriding issue that season, Brookhart told me, from his home in Texas, where he was retired from coaching and now works for a Christian nonprofit. Some 24 players missed 8 or more games apiece due to injuries that year. This included 2 of Jacquemain's 3 backups, he said. By the end of the '09 season, the Akron Zips football team was a poster squad for America's opiate epidemic. Not only was Jacquemain dismissed for issues related to his addiction, but as the season wore on and the injuries mounted, Bruce said, I would say 15 to 17 kids had a problem. It seems that most who had an addiction problem had an extensive problem with injuries as well. Toward the end of the season, he said, players had learned to hit up teammates who had just had surgery, knowing that they would have bottles of pills. Meanwhile, a dealer from off-campus sold to the players, visiting before practice sometimes, fronting the players pills, and being paid from the monthly rent and food allowance that came with their scholarships. The 2009 Zips inaugurated the school's new stadium with only 3 wins that year. The coaching staff was fired at season's end, but the effect of the season lingered on. Among the team's weaknesses that year was its size on defense. Overall, its defensive line and linebacking core were small. So too were its cornerbacks. They could never cover the receivers well, but were unable to provide much help, they could cover receivers well, but were unable to provide much help in stopping the offense's running back. The team's lack of defensive size was felt acutely at one position, safety, Tyler Campbell's position. Running backs often broke through the defensive line and linebackers. It was too often fell to the safeties to make these tackles. Against a monstrous Wisconsin team, the first game of the 2008 season, with a scholarship now and starting his first collegiate game, Tyler for 1 week was the nation's leader in tackles with 18, an exploit that coaches attributed to his hard work and perseverance. His stats, though, highlighted the team's weakness. When a safety is making that many tackles, Bruce said, there's a serious problem. A Opposing running backs should never get to the secondary that many times. As the season went on, Tyler injured his shoulder. His body never fully healed and he had surgery after the season. At the time of the surgery, a snowstorm hit Ohio and his parents couldn't be with him in Akron to ensure he took his pills correctly. Team doctors could give Wayne no records of what Tyler was given after the games. But those first 60 post-surgery Percocets following the '08 season seemed to have begun his addiction. By the next season, unbeknownst to those close to him, Tyler had transitioned to OxyContin. Tyler's '09 season was spotty. He played 11 games, but made only 31 tackles, and grew secretive and distant, which teammates and family attributed to his play on the field. In the spring of 2010, his grades dropping and his behavior moody, Tyler was sent home. Over the next year, he was in a rehab twice and relapsed. At some point, he switched to heroin. In June 2011, his parents put him in an expensive rehab center in Cleveland. 30 days later, he drove home with his mother, clean, optimistic, and wanting to become a counselor. The next morning, she found him dead in his bedroom of an overdose of black tar heroin from Columbus, likely hidden in his room before he entered rehab, Wayne believes. With a solid reputation in Pickerington, Tyler's family had kept his addiction a secret. But when he died, Wayne told his wife, "Let's open it up. Let's come out and be honest." The Campbells had 300 wristbands made for the funeral. Just say no for TC. The obituary urged mourners to donate money to a drug prevention group. 1,500 people attended the memorial. As they consoled him, Wayne was struck by how many people murmured in his ear, "We've got the same problem at home." 2 weeks later, Wayne met with fathers who wanted to do something in his son's memory. He knew a few of them, but learned that several also had addicted kids. That marked a moment of clarity for Wayne Campbell. "When Tyler died, it lifted the lid," he said. "We thought it was our dirty little secret. I thought I was the only one, but then I realized this is bigger than Tyler." From that grew a nonprofit called Tyler's Light. By the time I met Wayne Campbell, Tyler's Light had become his life's work, just as Joanna Crone was now devoted to solace. He spoke regularly at schools about opiates, showing a video of white middle-class addicts, one of whom was a judge's daughter. Wayne invited others to join him. Among them was Gary Cameron, commander at the Columbus Police Department's narcotics unit. Cameron's team was fighting the Jalisco heroin networks crawling over Columbus. Meanwhile, as he told auditoriums full of school kids, his stepson was addicted to their heroin. Cameron viewed the Jalisco boys as a new vanguard in narcotics, resembling isolated terrorist cells more than a traditional trafficking organization. Most drivers, he noticed, really didn't know much about the drug that they sold. They lived isolated in small apartments. No arrest slowed down these cells. Too many American kids were now hooked on opiates. Neither they nor their parents had much of an idea of what they were up against. So in time of the Jalisco boys, Gary Cameron viewed education as fundamentally police work. "We were quick to talk about the problems we associated with crack," Cameron said one day after a Tyler's Light presentation. "We just don't talk about heroin addiction." About a year after Wayne Campbell formed Tyler's Light, Paul Schoonover called. Could he and his wife Ellen help in any way? Schoonover asked. It had been a few months since Schoonover's son Matt had died from a black tar heroin overdose, the day after leaving 3 weeks of drug treatment. As I researched this story, the Schoonovers were among the first parents I met on my first trip to Columbus. The death of their son had come well into this epidemic, yet it had blindsided them. Until Matt's death, they knew nothing of it. So at the funeral, Paul stood and told hundreds of mourners the truth of how Matt had died, about the pill use, the OxyContin, then the heroin. He told them how through all of this, Matt had led a normal suburban life. He played tennis and golf. Most of his friends were goal-driven and making plans. Matt had goals, but had trouble following through to accomplish them. Still, he was working and part of the family. He never dressed shabbily, and though he ran out of cash quickly, he never stole from his parents. His bedroom door was always open. He never looked like what his parents imagined an addict would be. Yet all the while, it appeared, he led a dual life. What I was seeing, was I seeing what I only wanted to see, said Ellen later. I might have been. Shortly after Matt's death, Paul and Ellen Schoonover attended the speech of a motivational speaker with a breakfast group of well-heeled, middle-aged couples like themselves. The speaker that day asked them to imagine a second half of their lives about more than just enjoying what they'd accumulated. The question was, how do you take that second half of your life and make something significant from it? Paul said when I met the couple in the office of their Columbus insurance agency. Maybe not a lot of people come to that question. I don't know that I would have. We knew what we were going to do. Matt's death had led them there. The Schoonovers took it as a calling. They once thought addiction a moral failing, and now understood it as a physical affliction, a disease. They had thought rehabilitation would fix their son. Now they saw relapse was all but inevitable, and something like 2 years of treatment and abstinence followed by a lifetime of 12-step meetings were needed for recovery. After kicking opiates, it takes 2 years for your dopamine receptors to start working naturally, Paul said. Nobody told us that. We thought he was fixed because he was coming out of rehab. Kids aren't fixed. It takes years of clean living to the point where they may have a chance. This is a lifelong battle. Had we known, we would have never have let Matt alone those first few vulnerable days after rehab. We would let him go alone that afternoon to Narcotics Anonymous, his first day out of rehab. He had his new clothes on. He looked good. He was then going to play golf with his friend. Instead of making a right turn and going to a meeting, he made a left turn, and he's buying drugs and dying. When you start into drugs, your emotional development gets stunted. Matt was 21, but he was at a maturity level of middle teen years. Drugs take away that ability to act emotionally and mature. The drug becomes your god. The speaker's question that day prompted the Schoonovers to channel their grief. Too many parents were as lost as they had been. So Paul called Wayne Campbell, hoping to use Matt's story to sound the alarm and prepare parents for what awaited them. There was so much evil in all of this, said Ellen Schoonover. We will turn that into something good. We can embrace it and find meaning from Matt's death. And that concludes part 3. We'll continue part 4 on page 303 in the next couple of days. Hope you're enjoying the book, guys. Again, it's Dreamland by Sam Quinones. Highly recommend you just go out and buy this book. It's a fantastic book. I'm really enjoying it. I hope you guys are too. Talk to you later.